Welcome back to Legends and Lore. Today, we are going to talk about the 3 forbidden myths, stories and secrets so dangerous, so fundamentally destabilizing to the human mind, that the ancients believed merely speaking them aloud could invite ruin. Throughout human history, civilizations have built grand libraries to preserve knowledge, but they have also built deep, dark vaults to hide it away. There is a universal understanding across almost every culture that some doors are never meant to be opened. Some truths are not meant for mortal eyes. Over the next 90 minutes, we are going to unseal those vaults. We will explore 3 distinct tales of forbidden knowledge, the dire consequences of pursuing it, and the terrifying entities that guard it. We begin our descent in the shifting sands of ancient Egypt. Deep beneath the sun-scorched earth, hidden where the light of Ra has never touched, lies a treasure, not of gold, but of ink and papyrus. This is the legend of the Book of Thoth. Thoth was the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, magic, and the moon. He was the scribe of the gods, the divine record keeper who understood the mechanics of the universe. According to the ancient lore, Thoth compiled all of his ultimate, unfathomable knowledge into a single text. To read this book was to no longer be human. The first spell within its pages gave the reader the power to understand the language of the animals. Every bird in the sky, every reptile in the reeds, and every beast of the desert would speak to you clearly. The second spell was far more terrifying. It allowed a mortal mind to perceive the gods themselves in their true, unshielded forms, and to command the very elements of creation, the earth, the water, the air, and the celestial bodies. But Thoth knew the frailty of the human heart. He knew that absolute power would consume any mortal who possessed it. Therefore, he did not gift this book to the pharaohs or the high priests. He hid it. The book was sealed inside a golden box. That golden box was placed inside a silver box. The silver box within an ivory and ebony box. The ivory box within a bronze box. The bronze within a copper box. And the copper within an iron box. This heavy, cursed Russian doll of ancient metallurgy was then cast into the darkest depths of the Nile River, near Koptos, and to ensure no tomb robber or ambitious sorcerer could ever retrieve it, Thoth surrounded the iron box with a swarm of immortal, venomous serpents and scorpions that never slept. For centuries, it remained there, a myth, a whisper among the highest echelons of Egyptian priesthood, until a prince named Neferkapta, a man obsessed with the arcane, learned of its existence. Neferkapta was a scholar, a man who found no joy in the riches of his royal bloodline, but only in the dusty scrolls of the temple archives. When an ancient priest, bribed with 100 pieces of silver, revealed the location of the Book of Thoth, Neferkapta's fate was sealed. He took his wife, Ahwer, and their young son, and set sail down the Nile. He was warned that the gods do not forgive those who steal their secrets, but ambition is a venom far deadlier than the bite of any serpent. When Neferkapta and his family arrived at the riverbanks of Koptos, the water was unnervingly still. It was as if the Nile itself knew what lay beneath its surface and held its breath. Neferkapta, deeply studied in the dark arts of the temple priests, stood at the water's edge. He did not dive blindly into the depths. Instead, he began to chant. He wove an intricate, forbidden spell, a magic of binding grinding and lifting. The waters of the Nile began to churn. Slowly, unnaturally, the river parted. A dark, muddy chasm opened up before him, leading straight down to the riverbed. The stench of ancient mud and decaying river life filled the air. But Neferkaptah did not falter. He descended into the abyss. There, resting in the silt, was the iron box. But as the legends warned, it was not unguarded. The moment his foot touched the river floor, the mud erupted. A writhing mass of vipers, cobras, and monstrous scorpions swarmed over the iron box, hissing and snapping. Their venom could melt the flesh from a man's bones in seconds. With a heavy bronze sword in one hand and a staff of protective magic in the other, the prince fought his way through the swarm. He crushed the scorpions and severed the heads of the vipers, but the true guardian had yet to reveal itself. From the darkest corner of the riverbed rose a serpent of impossible size, an immortal beast placed there by Thoth himself. Its scales were as hard as obsidian, and its eyes burned with a divine, hateful intelligence. Neferkaptah clashed with the immortal serpent. It was a battle of human desperation against divine wrath. With a mighty swing, he cleaved the giant snake in two. But to his horror, the two halves slithered toward each other, merging back together to form the beast anew. It was an unkillable thing. Neferkaptah realized that brute force would not work against the magic of the gods. He needed cunning. He engaged the beast again, and once more he sliced it in half. But this time, before the two bleeding pieces could rejoin, he threw a handful of enchanted sand between them. The magic of the sand severed the mystical bond. The snake writhed in agony, unable to merge, and finally lay still. The guardian was defeated. Breathless and bleeding, Neferkaptah laid his hands on the iron box. He broke the seal. Inside was the copper box, then the bronze, the ivory and ebony, the silver, and finally the golden box. As he opened the final lid, a strange, ethereal light spilled out onto his face. There it was, the Book of Thoth. The papyrus was perfectly preserved, pulsing with an energy that made the air around it hum. He did not wait. He opened the scroll right there in the muddy trench of the parted river. As he read the first spell aloud, the world shifted. Suddenly, the chaotic noise of the riverbanks transformed into a symphony of voices. The birds circling overhead were no longer just cawing. They were speaking. The crocodiles in the distant reeds were whispering. He could understand every creature of the earth. Intoxicated by this godlike power, he read the second spell. The sky above him seemed to tear open. The sun, the moon, the stars, and the dark forms of the gods themselves became visible to his mortal eyes. He saw the strings that held the universe together, but he was blinded by his triumph. He did not feel the cold, divine fury gathering in the heavens. Thoth, the Lord of Wisdom, felt the seals of his vault break. He knew a mortal had stolen his mind's work, and as Neferkaptah ascended from the river, victorious with the book in his hands, Thoth went to Ra, the king of the gods, and demanded vengeance. Ra spoke only one chilling sentence. He and his are yours. Let none of them return to Memphis alive. Neferkaptah stood on the muddy riverbed, the golden light of the papyrus reflecting in his eyes. He had the book, the ultimate prize, but he was a scholar of the arcane, and he knew that objects of such immense power were inherently unstable. He could not simply carry the papyrus back to Memphis. He had to ensure the knowledge became a part of him, permanently. He called for a blank roll of fresh papyrus and a pot of mystical ink, sitting in the damp, oppressive gloom of the parted river. Surrounded by the corpses of the immortal serpent, he meticulously copied every single hieroglyph from the Book of Thoth onto the new scroll. It took hours. His hand cramped, and his mind reeled from the sheer weight of the spells he was transcribing. When he was finished, he did not read from his copy. Instead, he took a bowl of strong beer, dissolved the fresh ink of his copy into the liquid, and drank it. He swallowed the magic. He ingested the words of the gods. As the bitter liquid burned down his throat, he felt the knowledge sear itself into his very soul. He no longer needed the book to cast the spells. He was the book. Triumphant, he took the original scroll, resealed it in its golden box, and ordered the waters of the Nile to close behind him. As he returned to his ship, the royal barge set sail, heading north back toward Memphis. Neferkaptah stood at the bow, feeling like a god himself. He could hear the fish swimming beneath the hull. He could hear the wind whispering the secrets of the approaching weather. But high above, in the celestial realm, the god Thoth had finished his audience with Ra. The decree had been made. The curse had been unleashed. It began quietly. The river, which had been perfectly calm, suddenly gave a subtle, unnatural lurch. Neferkaptah's young son, Merab, was standing near the edge of the barge, watching the water. Without warning, a dark shape, a shadow beneath the surface, seemed to pull at the water itself. The boy tumbled over the wooden railing. There was barely a splash. He was simply gone, swallowed by the dark, churning depths of the Nile. Panic erupted on the barge. Where the boy's mother screamed a sound so harrowing it silenced the birds in the reeds. Neferkaptah, his heart turning to ice, rushed to the edge. He commanded the river. He used the magic of Thoth to force the water to yield his son. The waters parted once more, and the lifeless body of young Merab floated to the surface. He was brought aboard, his skin pale and cold. Neferkaptah refused to accept defeat. He had the power of the gods in his veins. He knelt beside his son and began to chant the most forbidden resurrection spells from the ingested book. He could not bring the boy fully back to the land of the living. Even Thoth could not reverse the ultimate decrees of Osiris, lord of the underworld. But the magic was strong enough to force the boy's spirit back into his lungs for just a moment. Merab's eyes snapped open. They were completely white, devoid of life, yet seeing everything. The boy's pale lips parted, and a voice that was not his own echoed across the deck. The corpse spoke of the divine court. It spoke of Thoth's fury. It revealed to Neferkaptah and Aware that this was not an accident, but a divine execution. Ra has decreed, the dead child whispered, that none of us shall return to Memphis. The god of wisdom demands his property. With those final chilling words, the magic faded, and the boy was gone forever. Neferkaptah, shattered and terrified, ordered his men to continue sailing. He thought he could outrun a god. He was wrong. The royal barge continued its morbid journey down the Nile. The air grew stagnant, heavy with the scent of morning and impending doom. Neferkaptah stood like a statue at the helm, the divine knowledge he had ingested burning a hole through his mind. He knew the names of the stars. He knew the language of the wind, but he could not undo what had been done to his son. Beside him stood his wife, Aware, She was a hollow shell, weeping silently into the dark waters that had claimed her child. But Thoth's vengeance was not complete. The decree of Ra was absolute. None of them would return alive. As the barge approached the sacred city of Koptos, the water around the vessel suddenly grew perfectly still again. The silence was deafening. No birds called, no reeds rustled. Awer, drawn by a mesmerizing, unseen force, stepped toward the railing. She looked down into the black reflection of the river. Neferkaptah tried to shout, tried to reach for her, but his limbs felt like lead, paralyzed by the very magic he thought he controlled. A massive, icy shadow materialized beneath the surface. It did not violently grab her. Rather, the water seemed to rise up and embrace her, pulling her silently over the edge. She did not scream. She simply vanished into the abyssal depths. Neferkaptah, breaking the paralysis, tore off his royal garments and dove into the freezing Nile. He searched the suffocating darkness, his lungs burning, until he found her lifeless body tangled in the roots of the riverbed. He brought her to the deck, laying her beside the cold form of their son. The Prince of Egypt was utterly, entirely alone, surrounded by the corpses of his own hubris. The magic within him began to rot his mind. The Book of Thoth was never meant to be carried in a mortal vessel. The voices of the animals, once a fascinating symphony, were now a cacophony of shrieks and whispers, mocking his grief. The crocodiles hissed at his failure. The vultures circling above squawked about the feast to come. The divine strings of the universe, which he could now see, only showed him the inevitability of his own demise. Neferkaptah realized the horrifying truth. The book was not a gift, it was a parasite. It demanded payment in flesh and soul. He ordered the crew to make port at Koptos, abandoning his journey to Memphis. He knew that if he brought the book into his father's kingdom, the curse would spread like a plague to the pharaoh himself. He had to quarantine the magic. He had to build a prison for the knowledge he had stolen. Using his vast wealth and the terrifying magical authority he now possessed, he commanded the local priests and laborers to carve a tomb deep into the bedrock, hidden from the eyes of the world. It was not a tomb of honor, but a vault of containment. He carefully embalmed the bodies of Awer and Merab himself, wrapping them in fine linen and sealing them with protective amulets, begging the gods of the underworld for their mercy. But he knew they would find no rest. Thoth had chained their souls to the book. When the tomb was finished, Neferkaptah dismissed his servants. He walked alone into the freezing, torch-lit depths of the cavern. He placed the sarcophagi of his wife and child upon the stone pedestals. Then he took the original papyrus, the Book of Thoth, still glowing with that sickening, beautiful blue light. He did not put it back in the iron box. He knew that boxes could be opened, seals could be broken. Instead, he lay down upon the central stone slab, alive and awake. He took strips of linen and began to bind the glowing papyrus directly to his bare chest, wrapping the bandages tight around his ribs. He would become the guardian. He would become the monster in the dark. With the book bound to his heart, he consumed a vial of deadly nightshade and lotus extract. As the poison slowed his pulse, turning his blood to ice, the tomb grew unnaturally cold. His vision faded, but the magic within him kept his spirit tethered to his rotting flesh. He died in the dark, but he did not leave. The curse of Thoth snapped shut like a trap. The tomb was sealed beneath tons of earth and stone, erasing it from human memory. For centuries, the tomb of Neferkaptah lay hidden in the suffocating silence of the Egyptian sands. The Book of Thoth rested on his mummified chest, its magic radiating into the darkness, illuminating the cavern in a ghostly, eternal twilight. The souls of his wife and son were trapped there with him, ethereal prisoners pacing the stone floors, bound to the very text that destroyed them. They became warnings whispered by firelight, legends told to ambitious scholars and arrogant magicians. The story of Neferkaptah is the ultimate testament to the danger of forbidden knowledge. It is a terrifying reminder that the universe holds secrets so profound, so fundamentally incompatible with human existence, that to learn them is to invite annihilation. Some doors are locked, not to keep us out, but to keep the horrors within from escaping. The Book of Thoth remains the first and most devastating of the forbidden myths, a book that costs everything and gives only madness in return. As we leave the cursed sands of Egypt behind, we must turn our eyes toward the ancient Middle East. For our next myth does not involve a book written by a god, but rather the gods themselves descending to earth to teach humanity the weapons of our own destruction. We are moving deeper into our three forbidden myths. If the Book of Thoth was about the danger of a single man's greed, our second myth is about a cosmic betrayal that changed the DNA of humanity forever. The Watchers. Most people know the term fallen angel, but the original texts, specifically the Book of Enoch, describes something much more calculated. High above the earth, on the peak of Mount Hermon, 200 high-ranking celestial beings known as Grigori look down not with love, but with envy. Led by Samyaza, they entered a mutual imprecation, a dark oath that they would all go down together so that no single angel would take the blame. This wasn't just a fall, it was an invasion. They didn't just want to live among us. They wanted to recreate the world in their own image. Why is this myth forbidden? Because it challenges the idea of human progress. According to the legend, the Watchers didn't just bring sin, they brought technology. Azazel, the most infamous of the group, taught men how to mine the earth and forge the weapons of our own destruction. Before Azazel, there were no swords, no breastplates, no organized slaughter. Simultaneously, he taught women the art of deception, the making of jewelry, and the use of antimony to paint the eyes. Other Watchers, like Armaros, taught the resolving of enchantments. Barakiel taught astrology. Kokabiel taught the constellations. This was a massive data dump of divine information into the hands of a species that wasn't morally ready for it. Imagine giving a nuclear reactor to a caveman. That is what the Watchers did to us. The result of this forbidden union was biological horror. The children of the Watchers and human women were the Nephilim. These weren't the gentle giants of fairy tales. These were 300-cubit-tall titans with the hunger of a god and the mortality of a man. The ancient texts say the Nephilim began to consume all the produce of the people. When the food ran out, they turned on the animals, and when the animals were gone, they turned on the humans. The world became a landscape of blood and terror. The forbidden part of this myth suggests that these giants weren't just big. They were abominations, a corruption of the very blueprint of life that the Creator had designed. Eventually, the cries of humanity reached the heavens. The archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, looked down and saw the chaos. But here is the most chilling part of the myth. the Watchers actually begged for mercy. They sent Enoch, a human, to plead their case to God. Enoch's mission failed. The verdict was final. The Watchers were bound in valleys of the earth until the day of judgment, and their children, the Nephilim, were cursed to destroy one another. This myth is forbidden because it explains the Great Flood not just as a punishment for sin, but as a necessary biological wipe to remove the corrupted technology and DNA the Watchers left behind. It leaves us with one haunting question. If the Watchers taught us the weapons of our destruction, and those weapons still exist today, is the flood really over? To understand the scale of this forbidden myth, we have to look at the leaders. This wasn't a nameless mob. These were specialists. Amazarek taught the world's first root cutters the knowledge of pharmacology and herbalism that could both heal and kill. Cassiade taught the smiting of spirits and how to strike the embryo in the womb, a dark look into ancient biological warfare. Then there was Gadriel, the one many scholars believe was the actual serpent in the Garden of Eden. He showed mankind how to strike death blows. We have to ask, why was knowledge of healing and stars grouped in with the knowledge of killing? Because in the eyes of the divine, humanity wasn't ready to distinguish between a tool and a weapon. Every piece of enlightenment they gave us was double-edged. This is why the myth is suppressed. It suggests our very civilization is built on a foundation of stolen heavenly fire that we were never meant to handle. Let's talk about the physical evidence mentioned in the forbidden texts. In the Book of Giants, a fragmented text found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nephilim are described having vivid, terrifying dreams of their own destruction. But it's the biology that's truly haunting. These weren't just tall humans. They were described as having 6 fingers and 6 toes and rows of double teeth. Across the globe, from the mound builders of North America to the caverns of the Middle East, skeletons fitting this exact description have reportedly been found, only to vanish into museum basements. Is the myth forbidden because it's a fairy tale, or because the physical remains of these Watchers' children prove that the Book of Enoch is a historical record, not a legend? Why Mount Hermon? Even today, this location on the border of Syria and Lebanon is one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It sits exactly on the 33rd degree of latitude and longitude, using the ancient Paris Prime meridian. In 1968, a United Nations base was established on the very summit of Mount Hermon, the highest UN permanent position in the world. Is it a coincidence that the Gate of the Watchers is now occupied by a global military presence? Ancient local legends say the cells of the imprisoned angels are still deep beneath the rock, vibrating at a frequency that can be picked up by modern sensors. When we talk about the forbidden part of this myth, we aren't just talking about the past. We are talking about a location that is still restricted to this day. The Watchers were sentenced to 70 generations of imprisonment in the valleys of the earth. If you do the math from the time of Enoch, many believe that sentence is nearly up. This myth is the ultimate forbidden story because it warns us that the spirits of the Nephilim, whose bodies were destroyed in the flood, still linger as evil spirits or demons on Earth, searching for new bodies to inhabit through the technology and secrets their fathers left behind. We are living in a world of Azazel's weapons and a Mezarak's chemistry. We are the inheritors of the Watchers' rebellion, and according to the myth, The Watchers are about to wake up. We have survived the curse of the Book of Thoth and the rebellion of the Watchers. Now, we reach the final, most dangerous secret of the ancient world, the unspoken name. In every major civilization, there is a recurring belief that the universe was not created by matter, but by sound. In Egypt, it was the breath of Ptah. In the Bible, in the beginning was the Word. But what was that word? Ancient mystics believe that there is a specific frequency, a true name of the Creator, that acts as the source code of reality. To speak it is to command the elements. To whisper it is to rewrite physics. This is why the name was hidden, encrypted, and eventually forbidden. If a human mind is the hardware, this name is a software so powerful it would melt the processor. Let's look at the most famous example, the Tetragrammaton. In ancient Judea, the four-letter name of God was considered so sacred and so dangerous that it was only spoken once a year by the high priest in the Holy of Holies. But there's a forbidden detail the history books leave out. The high priest would tie a rope around his ankle before entering the chamber. Why? Because if he mispronounced a single syllable of the name, if his vibration was off by even a fraction of a hertz, the divine resonance would strike him dead instantly. The rope was so his body could be pulled out without anyone else entering and dying. We are talking about a name that functions like a high-voltage electrical current. If you aren't grounded, it consumes you. Is this just religious myth, or is it physics? This is where the forbidden knowledge meets modern science. Look at cymatics, the study of how sound frequencies shape matter. When you play specific tones through sand or water, they form perfect geometric shapes. The flower of life, hexagons, and even DNA-like spirals. If the unspoken name is a complex frequency, it means the ancients understood that reality is just a hologram held together by a hum. Some theorists believe the Great Pyramid wasn't a tomb, but a resonance chamber designed to amplify this specific frequency. If you could find the right note, you wouldn't need to move stones with muscles. You could move them with a song. This is the secret the architects of the ancient world took to their graves. So, where is the name now? It was broken into pieces. It was hidden in the Solomon's Key, buried in the rituals of the Freemasons, and encrypted in the music of the spheres. There are whispers that modern AI and particle accelerators like CERN are actually trying to reconstruct the lost frequency, using computers to find the one word that can open portals to other dimensions. The forbidden myth concludes with a chilling prophecy. Mankind will eventually rediscover the name. But without the spiritual purity of the ancients, we won't use it to create. We will use it to uncreate. We will hit the delete key on the universe itself. Thank you for joining us for this 90-minute journey into the 3 forbidden myths. The truth is out there, but perhaps some things were meant to stay unspoken. To truly understand why the Watchers were considered forbidden, we have to look at the specific knowledge crimes of their leaders. It wasn't just general knowledge, it was a targeted dismantling of the natural order. 1. Semjaza, the architect of the pact. He was their leader, the one who convinced the 200 to tether their souls to Earth. His sin was the forbidden mixture, the idea that 2 different realms, heaven and earth, could be bred together. 2. Azazel, the father of metallurgy. Azazel is the reason this myth is truly dangerous. He didn't just teach smithing, he taught the art of the edge. He showed men how to create weapons that could pierce divine protection. 3. Barachiel, the astrologer. He taught the signs of the clouds. This wasn't just weather, it was the ability to read the mood of the heavens, to predict when the gods were looking away. 4. Kokabiel, the stargazer. He taught the constellations. In the ancient world, if you knew the position of the stars, you knew the map of the gods. He gave humans the GPS to the heavens. 5. Armaros, the spellbreaker. He taught the resolving of enchantments. He showed humans how to break the very laws that the Creator used to keep the world in balance. To truly understand why the Watchers were considered forbidden, we have to look at the specific knowledge crimes of their leaders. It wasn't just general knowledge, it was a targeted dismantling of the natural order. 1. Semjaza, the architect of the pact. He was their leader, the one who convinced the 200 to tether their souls to Earth. His sin was the forbidden mixture, the idea that two different realms, heaven and earth, could be bred together. 2. Azazel, the father of metallurgy. Azazel is the reason this myth is truly dangerous. He didn't just teach smithing, he taught the art of the edge. He showed men how to create weapons that could pierce divine protection. 3. Barakiel, the astrologer. He taught the signs of the clouds. This wasn't just weather, it was the ability to read the mood of the heavens, to predict when the gods were looking away. 4. Kokabiel, the stargazer. He taught the constellations. In the ancient world, if you knew the position of the stars, you knew the map of the gods. He gave humans the GPS to the heavens. 5. Armaros, the spellbreaker. He taught the resolving of enchantments. He showed humans how to break the very laws that the Creator used to keep the world in balance. In the East, the unspoken name is tied to the hidden kingdom of Shambhala. It is said the king of the world guards the final syllable of the name. If all syllables are reunited, the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, ends. We look at the 1920s expeditions by Nicholas Roerich and even the secret Nazi Ahnenerbe missions to Tibet. They weren't looking for gold, they were looking for the vibration, the word that could command the vril energy. If the Watchers and Nephilim were real, where is the physical proof? Between 1880 and 1920, thousands of reports surfaced across North America, from the Ohio Valley to the mounds of Wisconsin. New York Times archives from the turn of the century are filled with accounts of 9-foot, 10-foot, and even 12-foot skeletons being unearthed. But then, they vanished. We dive into the forbidden archaeology of the Smithsonian Institution. Multiple court cases and whistleblower accounts suggest that these remains were confiscated and dumped into the Atlantic or hidden in sub-basements to protect the Darwinian timeline. Why? Because a 12-foot human with double rows of teeth proves the Book of Enoch isn't a myth. It's a biological record of a hybrid species that shouldn't exist. Why was the world's music standard changed to 440 Hz in 1953? Ancient instruments, from Egyptian flutes to Tibetan bowls, were all tuned to 432 Hz. This is the mathematics of the universe. 432 is a subharmonic of the unspoken name. We experiment with the golden ratio in sound. When you play 432 Hz, water forms perfect mandalas. When you play 440 Hz, the patterns become chaotic and jagged. Is the unspoken name forbidden because it is the frequency of healing? And our modern world is intentionally tuned to a frequency of stress. We explore how the ancients used the name to heal broken bones, neurons and manipulate cellular structures instantly. The final secret of the name isn't just one person saying it. It's a harmonic. Ancient texts suggest that 144,000 people chanting the name in unison would create a global resonance that could flip the Earth's magnetic poles. We look at the world grid, the ley lines that connect the pyramids, Stonehenge, and Angkor Wat. These aren't just buildings. They are a global nervous system. If the unspoken name is the voice, then these sites are the nerves. We investigate the theory that the name was split into 72 parts, hidden in 72 different languages, to prevent humanity from ever coming together to hack reality again. If the Watchers and Nephilim were real, where is the physical proof? This is where the myth of the forbidden becomes a modern-day conspiracy. In the late 1800s, the United States was the site of an archaeological revolution. Thousands of ancient burial mounds were being excavated by everyday farmers and local historians, but they weren't finding typical remains. Newspaper archives from the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune are filled with accounts of skeletons ranging from 8 to 12 feet tall, many with double rows of teeth and 6 fingers. But then the Great Silence began. According to multiple whistleblower accounts and historical researchers, the newly formed Smithsonian Institution sent agents to these dig sites. They didn't come to preserve, they came to confiscate. Legend tells of the AIA, ancient intelligence agents, who would arrive at a farm in Ohio or Wisconsin, pack the 10-foot skeletons into wooden crates, and tell the locals that the remains were being taken for further study. Those crates were never seen again. Why? Because a 12-foot tall human with divine physical anomalies breaks the standard evolutionary timeline. If the Nephilim were real, then the Book of Enoch is a history book, not a religious fairy tale. In a landmark 2014 rumor, though the Smithsonian officially denies it, documents supposedly surface suggesting that thousands of these giant remains were loaded onto barges and dumped into the Atlantic Ocean in the early 1900s to ensure the public would never see the evidence of the Watchers. We are talking about a systematic erasure of our true origins. But the cover-up isn't just about bones. It's about geography. Let's look at the location of the fall. The Book of Enoch states the Watchers landed on Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is located at exactly 33.33 degrees north latitude and 33.33 degrees east longitude. Is it a coincidence that the number 33 is the highest degree in Freemasonry, or that the first atomic bomb was tested on the 33rd parallel? Even more chilling. At the very summit of Mount Hermon sits UN Base 1221. It is the highest permanent United Nations position in the world. Why would the UN need a high-tech monitoring station on the exact gate where the Watchers descended? Ancient local legends say the bottomless pit, or the abyss mentioned in Revelation, is physically located beneath this mountain. They aren't just monitoring the border, they are monitoring a portal. We've uncovered the curse of the Egyptian tomb, the physical cover-up of the giants in our own backyard, and the strange military interest in the 33rd parallel. But these are just the ripples on the surface. To understand the forbidden, we have to look at the power that was used to build the world itself, and why that power was taken away from us. As we move into the final hour of our journey, we are going into the heart of the frequency. We are going to look at the God frequency and the science of the unspoken name. If you thought the physical evidence was shocking, wait until you see the mathematical proof hidden in the stones of our ancestors. Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video.